Hi everyone. In this interview post, we are continuing, just expanding on our relationship to death and money, God, and mind. So it's quite interesting that, with death being the primary thing in our minds, and within that, how our lives are being held by money, God, and mind, that within this relationship comes the statement, you create and manifest who you are, or, who and what you are is what you will create and manifest. Now, within this, we have lots of religions and spiritualities and movements that very much focus on death and the hereafter. That within those relationships is created a trust that, when or if I align and dedicate myself within this religion or spirituality or movement, that I trust that in the hereafter and afterlife I will go to a good place. And so here comes in the relationship of trust and death within specifically the context of religions, spiritualities, and movements. And so we essentially dedicate our lives and our living to establish a trust in our relationship to death and dying within the context of the hereafter or afterlife. And so again, our entire lives is in direct alignment to death. And does any focus within such a life or living exist in the responsibility of who I am in thought, word, and deed, or any responsibility existent within life on earth for all? No, because everyone is too busy living their lives for death. So, death itself has our life in its hands. So I suppose we can kind of say money, God, mind, and death. And how within this relationship, all religions, spiritualities, movements, is geared toward death, the afterlife, the hereafter. None of them focused on our individual and collective responsibility within this physical existence in terms of actually changing life on earth within the context of how it has to be done, in really getting into the world system, the money system, and changing it from an actual, real, physical reality perspective. So within this, again, the focus and attention is more on the hereafter, the afterlife, or within the mind itself, in terms of how energy is the solution to humanity, or prayer, or dedicating your life or living to a spirituality or movement or religion. But none of it is about actual, real, physical, practical living, actual, real getting into the world system and money system and directing and sorting out and changing the actual systems that define, that govern, that control life on earth. So here we have how that principle of who and what you are is what you will create and manifest. We have become death within our minds. And so therefore it doesn't take a far step from that to kind of have an outflow of religions or spiritualities or movements that focus on death, the hereafter or afterlife. And so our attention is completely diverted to death or the hereafter or the afterlife, living life for death, instead of focusing our living in our own physical bodies within this real physical existence. So, it's quite interesting, this process of, really shifting your attention and focus from your mind or consciousness into this actual, real, physical reality and, living here, being here. I mean, even, many that are walking process find how quickly one wander into the mind or consciousness, into thinking, into imagining, into alternate realities. How difficult it is to just breathe, be here, and function and participate in your world and reality without going into alternate realities in the mind or consciousness. So within this process, you're constantly and continuously practicing moving yourself into physical reality, into the here, because we have throughout our lives separated ourselves into the mind or consciousness away from what is real, what is here, what is really in fact representative of life, which is our physical bodies. And within this, this is something one can then also consider having a look at in your relationship to death. I mean, why has there not within human consciousness or this physical existence came through the solution that we're, for example, presenting as the equal money system, the external and internal change as we're presenting with the Desteni process, and the extent to which we'll have to change individually, collectively, and on a global system level to change life on earth and living itself. It's like solutions that have come through as always only focused on parts, like only focused on thought, or only focused on energy, or only focused on like charities, for example, but never the actual greater system, the entire mind or consciousness, the entire global system. So, within this, it is because we have not taken the extent of responsibility that we should have. Meaning we tend to focus our responsibility only on the little things, on like thinking or energies or, people that have problems. But we've never gone farther in terms of seeing, but how or where did those consequences come from in the first place? And this is what Desteni and through the equal money system is showing. And all the little consequences are coming from this big, massive consequence as the entire global system externally and your entire mind or consciousness system internally. And changing only the little parts is not going to help if you don't get to the root of the problem, which is the entire global system externally and your mind or consciousness internally. And I've also walked this process in my previous posts within the blog in, explaining how and the extent to which we have to change life on earth. So here, we are essentially aligning our focus, attention, and directive principle to life, to living. And as I've explained in the previous interview post, the more one focus on gifting yourself your life back through taking responsibility for it in writing self-forgiveness, commitments, and corrective application, you really align yourself more and more into physical reality, into taking responsibility for what is here. And within this as well, just another point in relationship to death that I mentioned in the previous interview post. Fear of death, not fearing death is not something like, I'm not afraid of death, I'm living it up, and then you go and deliberately put yourself into dangerous situations where your life is essentially in the hands of fate. I mean, that doesn't prove that you don't fear death. That is simply utilizing and using and abusing death, if you will, as a way for your ego to be superiorized. Deliberately putting yourself in harm's way, taking risks unnecessarily. That's kind of taking your life and dangling it in front of death and saying, nah, 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 I'm not afraid of you. I mean, that's really stupid and irresponsible. Because again, within your life and living in every moment of breath, we don't know when our time is or how it's going to happen. So deliberately tempting that fate is egotistical. And so therefore, to consider within facing fear of death, not to go into the egotistical, superiorized polarity and go out there and put yourself in harm's way. Walking your process in relation to fear of death is actually quite the opposite, where it's simply just, that fear just release within you, and you focus on your life and your living and your expressing in every moment of breath. And again, obviously from a physical reality perspective, we're existing in a consequential world, and reality really extremely consequential. So you always live in reality with caution, with the common sense of this world and reality is pretty fucked up, and so are people's minds as well. And, therefore, for most part, we're literally living in a physical reality that we cannot trust at all. I mean, it's primarily because we've given all our trust to money, God, mind, and death. And, so therefore, when you live in this world, in this reality, don't be stupid or egotistical. Consider your movements, your living, your participation with absolute caution. While you are walking your process of giving your life back to you within yourself. So initially your process is a very internal process, as one will see in the 7-year journeys to life. And it will be internal until we get this physical reality sorted out through the equal money system that will make life on earth trustworthy. I mean, for this existence to become trustworthy, we ourselves have to establish our own self-trust within ourselves and our living, that we know who the fuck we are in every moment of breath, in thought, word, and deed. That you are in absolute self-awareness. I mean, to be able to trust another, another has to stand equal to and one with that they trust themselves, that they know who they are, that they're absolutely aware of who they are in thought, word, and deed. And then within this is what the equal money system will present. A existence of coexistence, working together, living together, a security of having a life and living from birth to death. And here we get into the correction of the word trust in itself. But again, it has to start within us as ourselves. And this is why the process that Desteni presents is how everyone will walk the same, either here or in the hereafter. In the hereafter, they've also walked self-forgiveness, commitments, corrective application, and actual change. So that we know that each one have walked this process equally as one, and have proven that they've walked this process through the writing, the forgiveness, the commitments, and the application. I mean, through and within that process, we can trust ourselves, as we will be able to trust each other. And, this is why, if you really investigate Desteni and the process that we're walking, change is extensive. And it's quite frightening how many are deluded into believing that mere energy or prayer or sayings or mantras or beliefs are going to change what we're facing in this existence. I mean, I would, for yourself, have a look at, if you haven't yet investigated Desteni, I would just, for myself, just to test, do some writing and forgiveness and commitments on a point that you're finding difficult to change. Like you find that you tend to be reactive, very quickly and easily to brother or sister or parents. Do some writing, forgiveness and commitments, and into the corrective application, see what you realize with regards to why you tend to react, what is it that is triggering it. And, you, in your forgiveness and commitments, for example, realize that, you're reacting to your parents because you find that every time they speak to you, a thought came up of they're not understanding me or they're not listening to me, and that one thought caused you to react to them. And now you're practicing a process of, just stopping that thought, because it's not that they weren't listening to you or hearing you. It was actually just that thought coming up in your mind that was creating that experience within yourself. And, simply stopping and changing a thought that comes up in your mind, it's quite a process. It's not as easy as it sounds. So one can imagine just taking the process of changing that one thought. We placed commitments for yourself of, I commit myself to when and as this thought come up, stop, breathe, communicate. And, when I'm speaking to my parents, just ask them if they're hearing and understanding. And so you then get into a moment or a situation with your parents, and that thought comes up again. They're not listening to me. They're not hearing me. And you apply breathing, breathing out. You let the thought go, and you ask them, for example, to just re-explain what it is that you explained to them, just to check that they're in fact understanding or listening. And you'll find that you have to practice it a couple of times, and your parents would, for example, communicate to you what it is that you communicate to them, and they actually did understand, they did hear you. It was you that didn't hear them because you were the whole time in a thought in your mind that was busy in there, that, creating the experience or illusion that it wasn't them hearing you or listening to you, when it was all the time in the reverse. You weren't wanting to hear or listen to them. So, a whole miscommunication happened just from that one thought. And changing that one thought, the thought would be reoccurring because it became an habitual pattern in your mind, within yourself. So imagine the process it takes to change one thought, never mind what else there is to face in the mind or consciousness. But it does get easier the more you move, the more dedicated you become, the more directive principle you get in relationship to your mind. But I want to use that example to show you, to change something like that. And now people say that this existence, this world and this reality is just going to change by energy or prayer or sayings or, things magically appearing or disappearing. It's not. And, for most of humanity, we have to wait, because many still want to believe that things are just going to magically change. And, here we get back to the hope and trust in money, God, and mind. It's quite fascinating in, how money is becoming more and more fucked up in this world, in this reality, so much so that it can't be trusted. How this physical existence is becoming more and more questionable in terms of whether God really in fact exists, with things getting so worse. How the mind is becoming more and more unpredictable. So it's quite interesting, wouldn't you say, that the very things that trust and hope had been placed into in relation to our lives, to define our lives for us, is becoming more and more questionable. Aren't we, on some level, showing ourselves that our trust is misplaced, that we have placed it in things that are separate from us, instead of ourselves developing a living trust within ourselves, and within that the responsibility of taking responsibility for ourselves, our minds, our lives, within and without. We'll continue more in the next interview. Thank you very much.